Head into the papers now, see what the headlines are across Nigeria. I have with me in the studio public affairs analyst Shijibomi Adebi Bennett, as well as in-house analyst Obani Akinwale. Gentlemen, good morning.
Good morning.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
Great. Let's go to the blueprint and let's start from there this morning. And it says it's focusing on the Bayelsa Kogi polls that will be coming up in about a month. IPAC cautions parties, others on hate speech, fake news, urges INEC on level playing field, and will accredit media that meet standards. The commission is saying that an electoral body reveals deadlines for campaigns and others. That's what you see on the front page of the blueprint. The Daily Times is where we go next. And it focuses on the minimum wage. It says federal government moves to avert impending strike, meets with labor leaders as workers kick against partial implementation. Private sector declares readiness to join looming strike. Okay, that's the Daily Times there. I guess my guests will be interested in this. Moving ahead now to the News Direct. Nigeria News Direct focuses on something else, and it says World Bank drops Nigeria's 2019 growth forecast to 2%. Growth forecast is disturbing. That's President Buhari is saying this. Okay, and recall that Nigeria's population growth rate is about 3%. All right, from there, let's go to Daily Times. Daily Times is focusing on the World Health or World Mental Health Day today, and Daily Trust says rehab centers grounded as 60 million Nigerians suffer mental disorder. Rehab centers grounded as 60 million Nigerians suffer mental disorder. It's really disturbing. All right, gentlemen, one issue that is on the front burner right now, which will interest a lot of Nigerians, is the issue of minimum wage. The labor leaders have said at one time or the other that the only language that government listens to is the language of strike. This consequential adjustment to the minimum wage has caused back and forth, meetings upon meetings, stalemates, and so on. But here we are right now. Government is ready to negotiate. What are we expecting? What are we looking at? Obani, let me start with you on this.
I think the crop of labor leaders we have these days are just unfortunate.
Unfortunate?
Unfortunate because I think they are not good students of history. I want to go back to as far back as 2012 to 2014, where you have about 30 states of the federation unable to pay salaries. You recall that most of the states are, for example, Osun, they were doing what they call modulated salary, while some states will pay 1 month, wait for 3 months. And when this government came on board, the first thing was to give out bailout funds.
Bailout funds.
And you could even recollect a couple of months ago, about 38 billion naira was released for Kogi state government. Vis-a-vis, we look at the number of industries that have shut down from 2014 when we begin to squander our reserve till now. I think what the labor, as much as we agree that we don't have a living wage in Nigeria, but what I think the labor should emphasize more is how is government trying to cut the wastage in the system and how to ensure that you force down the price of goods. Now, let's do a statistics, for example. You increase the salary to 30,000 naira. You increase VAT to 7.5. Now, what is going to be the spiral effect on cost of moving goods and services and cost of food? So, the more you increase the money, the more the woman in the market continue to increase the value of goods and services, and the more you continue to devalue naira. It's so unfortunate that, like I said, this crop of leaders are not even interested in the number of people that are out of job daily. And if you continue this way, you force the governors, you leave them with no options than to begin to retrench, because we don't have LD states in Nigeria. In Nigeria, maybe Rivers, Lagos, possibly Kaduna, Kano, they will be able to manage. But every other state, for example, Osun State, for example, is a civil service state. So what you find out is that
a lot of states like that are either farming states or civil service states, as the case may be. But Shijibomi, let me come to you on this. But he's talking about the issue of labor leaders. Do they really have a choice? Do they have the capacity to change things the way they are when it comes to the value-added tax, the inflation rate and all of that?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Because just yesterday, even IMF approved the fact that Nigeria increased that VAT to 7.5% because we need to. It's one of the lowest around. Even in the West African coast, it's the lowest. So, and we can also say these people always try to threaten with a strike or with strike action, but they don't have any choice. That's the only tool they have. But I believe that there should be just reason in everything we're all trying to do, because the problem is not on the federal government. How many employers are under the federal government employ? Let me put it like that. Because the problem is with the states. You know, he rightly mentioned it. By the time you agree anything with the federal government, the states will not be able to do that. So at the end of the day, you just agree on paper and you don't get implementation. Now, if you're saying you've reduced to 24%, you're saying you've reduced the other one to 23%, it doesn't still hold water to me. We should just come to like a middle ground. I'm not saying the federal government too should not shift grounds in terms of the 9% and the 6.5% that they are proposing, but we should just agree on something reasonable, because they will not be able to pay.
All right. Obani, what scenario do you see playing out as we get along? Because Labour has issued an ultimatum.
Yeah, what will play out is what has always been playing out. The Labour will go on strike. The Labour will go on their strike. The federal government will start paying some cadre of staff. Don't forget, a couple of days ago, we discovered a committee of Academic Staff Union of University, Kohanu, coming up as a faction of ASU. Don't forget, when we have this, the current NLC chairman issue, you have ULC coming out. Don't forget that there are a lot of unions that will tell you, because let me say, for example, my organization, for example, is paying above minimum wage, right? And you have a lot of organizations like banks, hotels that are paying above the correct minimum wage. Are you saying those organizations should shut down? So the question is that we need to look inward and see how is the labor itself helping the state. Don't forget, this crop of labor leaders are senior cadre officers in the ministries. So they have inherent information about what is obtainable in each state. So how do you now come back and say, I'm taking, for example, Osun State, where the current head of service is a labor leader, or Ologboyega, how will you now go to the governor and say, Governor, increase the salary by 9%, by 7.5%, when you know how much is accruing to the state government pocket? Or how do you expect the man in Oyo that is just coming in to set things right to pay that kind of increment with the same amount of money coming in, knowing amount that's been debited from those accounts daily?
So what you're saying is labor leaders are not
that
reasonable?
I don't want to be too harsh on them, but it is very, very unreasonable. There are better ways to ensure that what we want for our citizens is not the amount of money, it's standard of living. And there are ways to get it done, rather than to steal the system.
Thank you very much, Obani Akinwale, for coming on the program. Shijibumi, thank you so much for coming as well.
Thank you for having me.
I have with me in the studio a public affairs analyst, Shijibumi Adebiyi Bennett, and in-house analyst, Obani Akinwale. Gentlemen, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for coming on TVC Breakfast.
Pleasure.
All right, we head straight to the papers now, and I begin with the blueprint. Bayelsa Kogi polls. IPAC cautions parties, others on hate speech, fake news. Urges INEC on level playing field. Will accredit media that meet standards. Commission. Electoral body reveals deadlines for campaigns, others. I'll move to the front page of the Daily Times now. Minimum wage. Federal government moves to avert impending strike. Meets with labor leaders as workers kick against partial implementation. A private sector declares readiness to join looming strike. To the front page of News Direct, World Bank drops Nigeria's 2019 growth forecast to 2%. Rather, growth forecast is disturbing. Buhari. And on the front page of the Daily Trust, World Mental Health Day, rehab centers grounded as 60 million Nigerians suffer mental disorder. And then we have an infographic of details or facts on mental health in Nigeria. We'll be looking at that story shortly. And on the front page of the Daily Sun, 30,000 naira minimum wage. Federal government moves to prevent workers' strike. Minister holds emergency meeting with labor leaders. And finally, on the front page of the Vanguard, 2020 budget projections unrealistic. Senators It's a budget of taxation, minority leader, debt service percentage high, GDP ratio too small, capital expenditure paltry, majority leader, reps shut down move to stop debate on estimates. All right, like I said earlier, gentlemen, we'll be looking at the story on the front page of the Daily Trust. Today is World Mental Health Day, and the report on the front page of the Daily Trust says rehab centers grounded as 60 million Nigerians suffer mental health disorder. How worrisome, alarming is this for you? And there are reports, the UN report says that every 40 seconds, someone dies of suicide. I'll start with you, Obani.
See, the headline is so sweet that there is World Mental Day and the rehab center is also having mental problem. That is the irony of it. And sincerely yours, it is not what we should not expect, looking at the situation we find ourselves.
Really?
Yeah, globally, especially in this part of the world where people are emotionally bankrupt and there's a lot of psychological rape in the air. How do you address situation whereby people go to church and go to mosque to pray for what naturally government is supposed to provide? That is the highest level of psychology imbalances. And it is unfortunate that the way you treat one thing is the way you treat all things. And it's obvious in our life in as Nigerians and as Nigerian space that government, individuals, we don't pay critical attention to our health. And the status of our economy is the status of our psychological state. Because if you could think deep, you could get a better result. And it is so important that we look around. Those days you make mention of, are you from Yaba left? Are you from Yaba right? But when you go on the road, you just see people pressing phone on the road and shaking their head this way. So Yaba is virtually everywhere now. So it's so disheartening, and sincerely yours, it requires urgent attention before we lose it all. That's the truth.
Urgent attention. This report is saying that we have only 200 psychiatric doctors in Nigeria. We have a population of 60 million people who have mental issues, and you have only 200 doctors. How challenging is this, looking at the level of psychiatric challenge that we are faced with?
It's really disheartening. Let me use this word again, because I was just educated this morning. Maybe I'm privileged to be in the studio, and there is a medical practitioner in the studio as well. Yeah. So just helping us to, to shed light on the differences between mental illness and mental disorders. And during the news, I had Mike say something about, with everything we face in Nigeria every day, so how do we try to, it's like everybody is.
It's faced with one challenge or the other, absolutely.
And everybody has a bit of this mental, maybe disorder or illness. So what I'm looking at is the fact that even when you say there are just 200 of them, the medical practitioners in Nigeria, how many medical places or hospitals do we have for this? I know about just 2. So if you're not talking about the Yaba Lefty mentioned, you're talking about somewhere in Abeokuta. That's those are the 2 places I know. Functioning. And we have a situation whereby we are faced with challenges every day. You hear suicide every day. You hear so many depression every day. You hear people who want to even take their own life and maybe were rescued. And there are not enough at least there should be in every local government, so that when there is proximity,
address this issue. When
there's proximity, you walk in and you can, in, let me say, developed climes, this is something you do every time. You are faced with a challenge, or you are just down a bit, you walk into a session with a therapist. And after a while, you come out and you are okay. But here, you don't even know where they are. So does everybody need to get to, from Yanopaja, Badagry, you get to Yaba left?
Even the Yaba left, because I was there sometime last year, and I spoke with one of the psychiatrists, and he talked about the number of beds they have. The patients outnumber the number of beds. And they talk about financing. We just had the budget,
Yes.
and about
Health.
42 or 46
42 billion for health.
was allocated for health.
Yeah.
And not just, when we talk about health, we have other issues that has to be dealt with. Remuneration and all of this. Are we really, really ready to face this sector? Really?
Unfortunately, there is a proverb in my village that I don't know how to translate to English. And
We'll
what
help
it,
you.
I can be.
what really it literally means is that you are looking at the end results. You have not looked at what preceded those things. I remember in those days, there is always a guardian and counselor in every primary and secondary school.
Absolutely.
So when you have issues that you cannot discuss with your tutors, with your teachers, you walk into these people, discuss with them, they give you career path and what have you. How many of such do we have these days? That is one. Two, culturally, when people begin to show signs of depression and what have you, is our culture allowing people to go for psychiatric tests?
Stigmatization.
So people say, let him be inside. Go to the concussion corner. Let him use this to bath.
Or go to a spiritualist.
Exactly. So you look at it that even our culture is not helping. Then our values are being eroded away gradually because things like guidance and counseling, cheapest, are not being provided. So you find out that when you don't take care of these little things, we begin to have a society whereby the little thing that we refuse to take care of today will now escalate. And that is what we have. And like you mentioned, the budget, Ministry of Health, 42 billion. That is less than 1/6 of $1 billion for a population of over almost 200 million. So let's ration it, that we have that amount. Let's say if it's 200 billion to 200 million population. So you and I don't even have access to 1 million for health care.
Yeah.
So how do you now looking at communicable diseases, looking at the regular malaria and what have you,
how do you
now
embark on
take care of?
research?
Exactly. And look at the university system. How many people are willing to go into that area in this country? Even if you go out as a psychiatrist or as a psychotherapist, are you willing to practice in this country? Do we have the fund to ensure that you consult these people? So there are a lot of factors here and there that, even as we are here in the studio, I'm about to say that our psychological balance will only be determined by the doctors. Do we have the doctors in here? No. So the situation in this country is overwhelming that the first thing you hear on the news will give you psychological depression.
Yes, and to just chip in something, I think we can also provide solutions to all these things, which is about every hospital in Nigeria, all the PHCs, primary health centers, can we have an area, a section?
Do they have paracetamol in those PHCs? That's the least drug. Do they have it there?
At least
that's another issue.
If you go there for child delivery, they will ask you to go and buy everything that you need. So if you cannot afford to do just child care delivery, I want to tackle
it's a huge challenge, but something has to be done. Gentlemen, thank you for your time on the newspaper review.
Let's head into the papers now, see what the headlines are across Nigeria. And I have with me in the studio Shijibumi Adebi Bennett, as well as in-house analyst Obani Akinwale. Gentlemen, good morning. Nice to see you.
Good morning.
Great. Let's begin with the Blueprint newspaper. Blueprint this morning is focusing on Bayelsa and Kogi polls that are coming up shortly. And it says, IPAC cautions parties, others on hate speech, fake news, urges INEC on level playing field, will accredit media that meets standards. The commission is saying this. And electoral body reveals deadlines for campaigns and others. Certainly, we'll be talking about this with my guests shortly. Let's move on to Daily Times. Daily Times is focusing on the minimum wage. And it says, federal government moves to avert impending strike, meets with labor leaders as workers kick against partial implementation. Private sector declares readiness to join looming strike. Okay, that's the Daily Times. Daily News Direct is where we go next now. News Direct says, World Bank drops Nigeria's 2019 growth forecast to 2%. Okay, growth forecast is disturbing. The president is saying this, and certainly it is in some reports says that the president is not comfortable and rejects the World Bank and IMF statistics on Nigeria. All right, that's what you see on the News Direct. Daily Trust is where we go next now. Daily Trust is focusing on World Mental Health Day today, and rehab centers grounded as 60 million Nigerians suffer mental disorder. 60 million Nigerians. Really disturbing, staggering figures there. From there, let's go to the Daily Sun. And Daily Sun is focusing on the 30,000 naira minimum wage. Federal government moves to prevent workers' strike. Minister holds emergency meeting with labor leaders. Okay, all Nigerians wait to the outcome of these meetings. Vanguard is where we go next. And Vanguard says 2020 budget projections unrealistic. That's quoting senators saying that. And it's a budget of taxation. Minority leader is saying this in the Senate. And debt service percentage is high. GDP ratio too small. Capital expenditure is paltry. That's according to the majority leader. Reps shut down move to stop debate on estimates. All right, the National Assembly, from what we gather, want to expeditiously move towards this. Now, gentlemen, let's go to the story on the front page of the blueprint, which focuses on the Bayelsa and Kogi polls that will be coming up sometime in November. Now, if you've been following developments from Bayelsa and also from Kogi State, there has been a lot of drama as a build-up to the election. But what I want us to really look at is our democracy maturing? Because this staggered elections is what Nigerians always say are litmus tests for INEC and for politicians to get to see whether we're making progress in the way that we're building our political culture. Shijibumi, let me start with you on this.
Yes, I think Kogi, the only one I'm looking forward to is the Bayelsa. The Kogi one will be, I don't want to use interesting because a lot has to be done to make sure that that election takes place without loss of lives. Over the week,
fear for violence?
Just look at the pattern. Then the last election that was held there, we knew what happened. That's the by-election for the House of Rep or something. So over the weekend, the convoy of the Deputy Speaker of the House of Assembly ran into the PDP campaign entourage. And it was God that saved people. A lecturer of the Kogi State University was injured. And even the rhetorics coming from the state, you hear the PDP man saying, it's like APC is ready for violence, nobody has monopoly for violence. We are not scared of that. Even the spokesperson of the deputy speaker, what he wrote was really, really condescending because we read something like that they were going to arrest the PDP candidate and put him in if he doesn't behave.
All right. So all this back and forth.
It's a pointer that our security agencies should be alive to their responsibilities because that state has always been a kind of volatile state when it comes to elections.
All right. Obani, the issue of hate speech and fake news, we often see them in a build-up to election. What do you see? From this headline we even have here, IPAC cautions parties, others on hate speech, fake news. How apt is this caution that is coming forth?
What is IPAC? Do we really have what is called IPAC in this country?
Well, IPAC is
because
there.
IPAC was supposed to be inter-party advisory
of
committee. And for me, they don't exist. Because the first question you asked earlier was that, is our election system or maturing? Absolutely no. It's always been a two-party thing. NRC, PDP, UMPP, DPN, GDM. Then you have APC, AD, APC, AC, APC, ACN. You just find out that we don't seem to have anything called IPAC. And in terms of, so if you don't have that level of maturity in terms of evolving our political system, so-called 90 political parties, so how do we say we are matured? How do we say we are making progress? And hate speech, it's not hate speech. It's a normal language, a political language. Because naturally, the government is criminalizing what people say. We know what left Showore to where he is now, Agbajalingo where he is now. But we have our political leaders that are careless with their languages. And if you look at the latest level of alignment and realignment, either in Kogi or in Bayelsa, you discover that they are the same crop of people. So what we just appeal to our people, the electorate, is that stop fighting, maiming, or killing yourself for these brothers and sisters that are just having just a single interest of running to power. Look at the whole scenario in Bayelsa. David Leon is a former PDP man. The Minister for Petroleum Resources is a former PDP man. Senator Ologubiri is a former PDP man. The DG campaign is a former PDP man. The president, so it's just people trying to share, is like Otto Bismarck Remada says, it's just people trying to share power. So for me, we are not maturing. For me, there is no, what we're going to do is just, one thing that I want to appreciate about this present administration is that with Buhari in government, they are not too sure what his body language will be, because equipment may lose and equipment may win.
But and should now, it be based on the body language of the president?
There is every tendency that Mr. President may neither here nor there. So if you are an incumbent, you rather use everything possible within your power to look at what play out in Kano. Look at what play out in Sokoto. You rather use whatever we have within your power so that you don't have another.
But we have seen so far, the president, with the antecedents we have seen,
what antecedents?
He has not been directly involved the way we have seen in the past, where the president decides or has some level of influence. We've not seen this. He's been very,
I beg to disagree. If you look at the scenario that played out in Kano, that people were beaten in broad daylight, there were soldiers there, there were military there. The chief security officer of this country is Mr. President. Yeah. You look at what happened to the commissioner in Rivers State that has to jump out from a 2-story building in Rivers. And even the governor himself is not safe. So for you to say the president, look here, a bit not concerned or is indifferent,
it's just a perception.
It may not be absolutely correct. Okay. But one thing that I would just appeal to the electorate in those two states is that we know the pedigree. Bayelsa, Water Creeks is always a volatile environment. Okene axis, the Kogi East axis of Kogi State is always volatile. But I'm appealing to Nigerians. Like Jonathan said, this guy that you are going for, your life is not worth putting yourself on the slaughter slab for them. Just let us be wise and don't let anybody use us.
I want to add also
as round off now.
Yes, I don't believe that the president should be aloof or should be disinterested. I believe the president should be interested. We're not saying partisanship now. We're talking about the security of the state. If the president makes everybody to realize that if you flout the law, no matter who you are, you will be punished, then everybody will sit tight. Okay. But in a situation whereby everybody believes just do everything you want to do or you have to do to get to that seat, then there will be violence.
So there should be consequences for violating election standards.
Exactly.
Okay. Shijibomi Adebi Bennett, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you for
Obani Akinwale, thank you very much.
Right.